A century of conflict marked by deep-seated animosities and complex historical narratives has shaped the Israel-Palestine struggle. Roots of the Israel-Palestine struggle can be traced back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The Israel-Palestine conflict is deeply rooted in competing claims to the same land, with both Israelis and Palestinians asserting historical and religious connections. These claims are not just about territory but also about identity, culture, and faith. The rise of Zionism in the early 20th century, advocating for a Jewish state in Palestine, escalated tensions. Jewish settlers began arriving in increasing numbers, seeking to establish a homeland in what they considered their ancestral land. After World War I, Britain gained control of Palestine, intensifying Jewish and Arab population tensions. The British Mandate period saw increasing violence and unrest, as both communities vied for control and recognition. In 1947, the UN proposed a partition plan, accepted by Jewish leaders but rejected by Arab leaders, leading to immediate fighting. The plan aimed to create separate Jewish and Arab states, but its rejection by the Arab side led to a full-scale conflict. In 1948, Israel declared independence, triggering the first Arab-Israeli war and displacing hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. This event, known as the Nakba, or catastrophe by Palestinians, remains a pivotal moment in the conflict. The Six-Day War in 1967 resulted in Israel's occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. These territories remain central to the ongoing conflict, with disputes over their status and future. Peace efforts have failed to resolve core issues, including the status of Jerusalem and Palestinian refugees' right of return. Numerous negotiations and accords have been attempted, but a lasting solution remains elusive. The conflict remains highly volatile, with periodic outbreaks of violence and a constant undercurrent of tension. The struggle continues to impact the lives of millions, shaping the region's politics and society. October 2023. A turning point in the conflict. On October 7, 2023, Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel, marking a significant escalation. This attack was meticulously planned and executed, catching the Israeli Defense Forces off guard. The rockets fired from Gaza targeted multiple cities, causing widespread panic and chaos. The attack resulted in over 1,200 Israeli deaths, the deadliest day in Israel's history. Emergency services were overwhelmed as they tried to respond to the numerous sites of destruction. The scale of the casualties and damage was unprecedented. Israel responded with a full-scale military offensive on the Gaza Strip, deploying ground troops, tanks, and artillery. The Israeli government declared a state of emergency and mobilized its reserves, signaling a prolonged and intense military campaign. The intensity of the Israeli response was unprecedented. Drawing comparisons to the 2014 Gaza war, airstrikes and artillery bombardments targeted key infrastructure and residential areas, leading to significant destruction and loss of life. The international community condemned the violence and called for an immediate ceasefire. Protests erupted in major cities around the world, with people demanding an end to the bloodshed and a return to peace talks. The conflict quickly escalated into a humanitarian crisis, with Gaza bearing the brunt of the violence. Thousands of families were displaced, and humanitarian aid organizations struggled to provide essential supplies and medical care to the affected population. Gaza. A humanitarian crisis unfolds. The Gaza Strip, home to over 2 million Palestinians, faces a catastrophic humanitarian crisis. Israeli airstrikes have reduced neighborhoods to rubble, displacing over 1 million people. Gaza's healthcare system, already on the brink, has been decimated by the offensive. The Israeli blockade, in place since 2007, has severely restricted essential goods, exacerbating the crisis. The recent conflict has further tightened the blockade, cutting off Gaza from the outside world. Section 4: International Response and Accusations of War Crimes. The international community has responded with condemnation, calls for a ceasefire, and diplomatic efforts. Leaders from various countries have voiced their concerns, urging both sides to de-escalate the situation. The United Nations has held emergency sessions to address the crisis, emphasizing the need for immediate humanitarian aid and protection of civilians. The International Criminal Court has opened an investigation into potential war crimes by both sides. This move aims to hold accountable those responsible for violations of international law. The investigation will look into actions taken during the conflict, including attacks on civilian infrastructure and the use of prohibited weapons. Human rights organizations have documented indiscriminate attacks on civilian areas by Israeli forces and Hamas. These reports highlight the severe impact on the civilian population, including loss of life, injuries, and displacement. The destruction of homes and essential services has exacerbated the humanitarian crisis in the region. The targeting of residential buildings, hospitals, and schools has drawn widespread condemnation. Such actions are seen as violations of international humanitarian law, which protects civilian structures during conflicts. The international community has called for accountability and justice for the victims. Hamas has been accused of indiscriminate rocket fire and using human shields. These tactics endanger both Israeli and Palestinian civilians, complicating efforts to achieve peace. The use of densely populated areas for military purposes has been criticized for putting innocent lives at risk. Protests around the world have called for an end to the Israeli occupation. Demonstrators have gathered in major cities, expressing solidarity with the Palestinian people and demanding an end to the violence. These global movements reflect widespread frustration and a desire for a just and lasting peace in the region. Section 5. The Price of Truth. Journalists in the crossfire. The conflict has highlighted the dangerous environment for journalists in conflict zones. The Committee to Protect Journalists has documented a rise in journalists killed, injured, and detained. Journalists face threats from airstrikes, artillery shelling, and sniper fire, as well as restrictions from the Israeli government. The international community must protect press freedom and ensure journalists can report freely and independently. Accurate and impartial reporting is essential for holding those in power accountable.